Yamaha just dropped Firmware 2.0 on the YC series of keyboards, and a ton of great stuff. New sounds, new sets, seamless section switching, controller options. Let's get into it. Hey guys, Steve from Featherlightstudio on Yamaha just dropped Firmware 2.0 for the YC series of keyboards. And what a breath of fresh air that is. And kudos to Yamaha for making such a fantastic live performance board, not just up to date, but relevant. Keeping this relevant in, the incredibly competitive world of keyboards right now. Kudos for that, because when they get it right, you got to give it to them. Every single firmware has updated it with great new features and sounds and things. We got new sounds and new live sets. We've got seamless section switching, new controller options, a bunch of new stuff. So let's get into it and break each section down and see what they've added to this already impressive and super dependable keyboard. All right, so first, before we do anything else, we're gonna back stuff up. And so many people miss this step just because they wanna dive in, put on the new firmware, they get all those new sounds and functions and features and things, and then they're like, my old sounds. So without a doubt, the most important thing by far is backing it up. You should already be doing this on a regular basis anyways. We've got a USB key in here all the time. It's a really low profile USB key, and it just stays with the board 100% of the time. And then we got the backup to the backup. And it just means that if we have something go down, or if we get, a corruption on the key or whatever, we've got a live, key backup. And it also means that we can walk into somebody else's, YC, plug it in, boom, it's ready to go. So if you're doing a show and you've got, a back line that already has this particular model set up for you, you can just bring your key and you're good to go. First things first, we're gonna back it up, and we're gonna do three really important types of backup. The first one is going to be an overall board backup. We're going to back up the entire contents of the YC, because this is going to make sure that all your routing, all your zones, all your controller things, all of that kind of stuff is saved before we put the new firmware in, because the firmware will wipe all of that data 100%. So if you've done a ton of extra work with routing and that kind of stuff, or controller, options or zones or that kind of stuff, you absolutely want to do a full keyboard backup. Second backup we're going to do is the live sets backup. You want to back up each one of your live sets, because your live sets are probably, like mine, put in a specific order because you're doing, specific song transitions, or you're doing, set transitions from one set to another, or you're doing different kinds of controller options. Whatever your particular setup is, you're going to want to back those live sets up, because you're going to want to load them back in that order as well. And the last backup we're going to do are individual sounds. The individual sounds of the most common things that you use in your live sets, the really important ones that you just can't rebuild later. It's an easy enough process because you're not actually renaming anything. You're just scrolling down to live set file, and then you hit save and save again, and it auto loads the name of the sound file you're saving. So this goes really, really fast. Now you could upload those individual sounds to Yamaha's Sound Mondo site. That's a great way of archiving your sounds, actually. And there's an amazing variety of incredible sounds up on Yamaha's Sound Mondo site, and it's up there specifically to trade and create a social environment for all your YC related activities and sounds and stuff. So we'll talk more about that, but that's the three categories: a total board backup, our live sets backup, and individual sounds. It might seem like a pain right now, but trust me, you will thank me in the future, because that means when you get the new firmware in here, you can go back through all those sounds you saved and cherry pick everything and put it all in the order that you need or want for your specific setup. All right, so now that we backed up all of our sets and sounds onto our USB key, we're gonna pull it out of the YC, and we're going to set all that original data aside. And then we're going to get a brand new USB key, preferably USB 3.0, because we're going to need that extra speed. Each one of these firmware update packages gets larger and larger, so we're going to need that extra speed. And the first thing we're going to do with our brand new key is we're going to set it inside the YC, and we're going to format it on the keyboard. Now, some people have had no trouble whatsoever formatting the key on their PC or an external device. Some people have reported having corruption issues. Save yourself the headache and just format your new key on the YC. I know it's just FAT32, but for whatever weird reason, if you format it on the YC, it works perfectly. Once it's formatted, we're going to pull it out of the YC. And we're going to head on over to our computer, in this case our Mac Studio. We're going to plug our newly formatted USB key into the computer, and we're going to head over to Yamaha's download site. I'll leave this information in the links below. This is all the media that's related to your Yamaha keyboard, so you can get things like manuals here and some other information and the firmware update files themselves. Here you can view the change log for each one of the firmware updates. It gives you all the stats and data of everything that's been changed with each of them. There's some caution files about what not to do and a big red warning that states it will delete everything off your YC keyboard currently, which is why we were so careful about backing it up in the first place. From here we click yes, I agree, and we can download the zip file. From here, we want to navigate over to where we unzipped the Yamaha package files. There's quite a bit of stuff in there. There's some PDFs and manual addendums and things, as well as a step-by-step list of instructions. But we want to drag and drop the PGM file onto the root directory of our newly formatted USB key. And yes, if you've already updated your YC's firmware in the past, you could use that same key again. You just need to make sure that you delete the original firmware that you had on there and replace it with the new version 2.0 firmware update file. You can actually have other files and things on there, but the firmware file itself, the PGM file, has to be on the root directory part. So the updated information and the addendum files gives lots of great info, shows all the new voices, it shows the new data tables and the new sets and live set stuff. So there's a lot of great stuff here, as well as the step-by-step information of how to do it if you need the README file. It's a pretty good size file as each firmware update gets larger and larger. And once the transfer is complete onto our new USB key, we can take it out of our PC and head back over to the YC to perform the update. From here, it's time to begin the update process. So we take our USB key, insert it in the to device slot on the back of the YC. But one thing to note first, if this is what your power circumstance looks like, do yourself a huge favor and don't. If the power is interrupted anytime during the firmware update process, you could easily do damage to your board, so just plug it into the wall. We also need to make sure that the power to the YC is off, as there's a series of keystrokes we need to make before we power it on. Once the power is off, we need to hold down the store and menu button and continue to hold them down while we power the YC on. Hold those down until we see the updater page in the LCD. Once the updater page shows up, it'll say now loading, and then we can let go of the two buttons. From here, it'll show us the old version that we're updating from and the new version we're updating to. If we hit the enter button, it warns us that all memory will be initialized one last time. From here, once we hit enter, there's no turning back and the updater process starts. And it cannot be interrupted for any reason. Like I said before, you can do serious damage to your board if you interrupt the updating process. And it's a lengthy one. These are large firmware files now. Each one gets sizably bigger. So the entire total lapsed time here takes about 20 to 25 minutes. If you've got a fairly high-speed key, if it's an older 2.0 or slower key, you might be here for quite a while. So be patient. It has to go through the entire process of updating each one of the 24 wave sets. That's a little bit of a lengthy process. When it's finished, you'll get the current version notification, and it'll instruct you to turn the YC off. We're going to leave the update key in and power back on the YC. So once the update process is completed, it's going to be just like having a brand new toy. It's a brand new keyboard with all the new sounds and sets and stuff, and it's super easy to want to dive right in. But we're going to do one super important thing before we do that. Just like we did at the beginning, we're going to do exactly the same thing with the brand new firmware update live sets and sounds, and we're going to store them on our update key. This is going to do a couple of things. The first thing it's going to do is allow us to load back in our complete keyboard. That initial backup that we did, that saves all our routing and all of our zones and all that hard work and everything back to square one. And then we can take our update key, that's the one that we have the update firmware on. We're going to save our new live sets from the new update and our live set sounds from the new update to that same firmware update key. This will save you so much headache in the future. It really will, because it allows you to cherry pick all the new stuff and put it in your old setup in the place and order you want. And it'll save you from having to move all the stuff in the new firmware update to different places and do all that cutting, copying, and pasting. It's a pain in the butt, and it will save you a ton of work if you simply save the new setups, the new live sets and sounds to your firmware update key. All right, so they've done quite a bit to the architecture of how you save your sounds and sets. And the first thing they did is double the capacity of the live sets from 20 to 40. So that's 160 something live sounds. Now, doubled that up to 320 total live sounds, arranged in sets of 8 or banks of 8. So the advantage of that is that you literally have twice as much storage for everything. In fact, you have so much storage that you could literally leave your entire board exactly the way it was. Don't touch any of your own stuff if you don't want to. And you could load all of the new firmware voices and live sets onto the second set of banks and have everything in your board all at one time if you wanted to. Now, if you're like me and a lot of your live sets are set up for transitions and stuff, and it's like a hodgepodge of a lot of different kinds of sounds and sets from every place and from a bunch of different firmwares, that may not work for you. That's kind of the advantage of what we did before by saving them on 2 different keys. It allows you to cherry pick stuff and put it where you want. But if you wanted to, you literally could put everything in there. And one of the nice things is each firmware update adds a bank of sounds to showcase the new voices. Well, we got some new voices as well. We got some new voices from the GS1 synthesizer, which was really the predecessor to the DX7. So long, a couple of years before the DX7 would make keyboard history and change the world forever, the GS1 was there. And that was one of the early FM synths, and that whole kind of FM synth generation with those incredibly iconic sounds and stuff, that all came from there, including the new effect we get to play with. We'll talk more about that in a minute, the Ensemble Chorus effect, but that all came from the GS1. So that really has given us some really new and fun voices to play with in the GS Voices category, and they've given us Bank 19 to kind of explore that. Now, it's not just GS Voices in Bank 19. There's also a gorgeous CFX2 and some other things, but each firmware update has a bank of sounds to showcase the new voices. So for example, in 1.40, we got the new organ. So we had an extra bank, bank 18 or live set 18 to showcase that. In fact, in version 1.30, we had 4 extra banks or live sets to showcase all the changes. So every new firmware update just keeps adding to the overall capacity and variation of all the voices we have to play with. And now what we have is a really well-rounded and really versatile keyboard that has a ton of different variations. So in Bank 19, we've got some great fun sounds to play with, and one of them is the new CFX2. And this is built around some of the same kinds of character as the CFX1, but has a great deal more resonance. And they've used a process called ARE to kind of model and emulate that resonance, and it's really made for a beautiful, blooming, kind of resonant piano compared to the CFX1. So let's take a listen to the CFX1. And then the CFX2. It just has a little more swell around the note, and it's really a gorgeous piano and super fun to play. I'm not gonna audition all these sounds, and there's far better players out there to audition than me, but in terms of just a piano that has a lot of life to it, this really does. They got some great fun layers in here. The CFX2 with a 78 Rhodes adds a really, really nice kind of overall touch to it. Has really just great 80s vibes, lots of cool kind of vintage sort of character there. And some of the stuff is really reminiscent, especially the new JS voices of my old DX7 voice bank and just all the sounds that I loved so much. I mean, talking about taking you back. With the addition of the new JS voices, there's some great FM stuff in here as well. And finally, one of my favorite kind of FM voices is actually the pipe organ, the church organ. There's just a ton of creative possibility in here, so I'm going to let you go through and explore that on your own. And there's some great demos out there as well, but some of the stuff is really beautifully put together. The CFX2 Cinema with the strings is really, really fun and beautiful. One of the other things that we got in this firmware update is a new chorus ensemble. And this one is actually from the original GS1 synthesizer. And why that's a big deal, like we talked about before, is that it's an FM synth, and it was the predecessor to the DX7. And that FM synth, that sound, just happened to be perfectly matched for the GS1 Ensemble Chorus. It just, for whatever reason, just makes FM sounds sound fantastic. And so we've inherited that basically, and we have that to use, you know, with all the other effects and things. So we've got like an EP here, an FM style EP. But then we add the GS1 chorus, the ensemble chorus. And it's just like going back in time. I mean, it really just immediately takes me back. One of the other really nice additions is seamless section switching. Now, we've had seamless live sound switching for a while, and that's really nice to be able to go back and forth between sounds that are really different from one another. So we have this really even transition between whole sounds. But what we haven't been able to do in the past is change a voice with the actual voice switch and not have it end, you know, in any other way than simply abruptly. So before, when we didn't have seamless section switching and you had a voice or a sound that had layers on it, like maybe an organ under it on the pedal, and then I'd have brass assigned to the hardware lever, and I'd hit the switch, it would shut the brass off immediately, or whatever voice was assigned to that particular switch. And that was pretty abrupt. But now, if we go to menu and then control panel, and then down to section switch mode, we can change that from real time to what's called next key. And next key means that it's not going to switch the voice off the second we hit it. It's going to wait for us to transition to the next chord change or the next key we play. So we've got the same. I can turn it off. You know, and I'm not constantly or just abruptly chopping the voice off. And that's a pretty big change. It's a pretty big deal when you play live and you're not just playing one sound. You're playing a bunch of sounds that have layers or voices on them. You can switch back and forth between them now without having those really abrupt changes. One of the other things that I'm super excited about is the ability to use our USB connectors. The device in port can now be used as a control input. So that opens up a ton of possibilities. So we just plug this guy directly into the device input and we turn on our controller, and now we have a direct connection to the YC that doesn't have to rely on just the 5-pin MIDI connector. If you have older boards like this, or current boards that have MIDI, that's great if you have full-size rigs and setups and things. But if you just want to add a quick controller to your YC setup, or maybe you're playing something like a YC73 or 61 and you want those extra key ranges, like you're kicking left-hand bass or something like that, we can now do it instantly. And it's powered. So even an old, this is an old controller, an old Oxygen 8, this thing powered directly from here. Now there's some caveats. It can't draw more than 500 milliamps, although few controllers this size and weight do. And it runs just on standard USB 5-volt power. That's a lot. Most of them, fit that requirement. Now there's a couple of larger ones maybe that don't, but for smaller setups like this, especially small compact USB controllers, this is a godsend because it opens up a ton of possibilities. Now, obviously, the most obvious is that if you're playing upper and lower organ manuals, this, instantly achieves that without having to have a big complex rig or 2 full-size keyboards. That's great for that. But it also opens up control for things that are, smaller, more compact controllers that you might just want off to the side or even on the YC itself. This opens up a world of possibilities for us Yamaha YC users. And one of the other things is kind of a small thing, but it's actually a big thing when you're playing live, is the ability to jump from one bank to another bank 10 banks away. And now that we have twice the amount of space, the real estate, that's probably going to be a much bigger deal. So we can hit the exit button and hold it and just page up in banks of 10 at a time. And this allows us to make huge jumps without having to sit there and just hit the plus button over and over again when you're playing a gig. If you're really jumping around in banks, this is a real lifesaver for sure. So as you can see and hear, Yamaha has done a fantastic job at not just keeping this board updated, but keeping it relevant. With every new firmware update, it breathes new life, new creative possibilities into it, and it just makes it such a joy to play. And over the last couple of years, I have used this under every possible gig circumstances, from large stages and festivals to tiny cramped clubs and gigs, and it has just performed flawlessly. Hey, thanks for hanging out, guys. I appreciate it. If this was helpful in any way, please hit the subscription and notification bells. It really does help keep a young channel like this going, helps keep a young channel like this growing, and helps me make more videos like this for you guys. Stay safe, get out there and add something creative to the world, because it could really, really use it. Take care. We'll catch you guys in the next video.